Hi everyone, in this second video where I will detail the study of Patrick Blelly and Jean-Luc Marchand, we will talk about the FMT. What is FMT for those unfamiliar with the survey of the MH370? FMT is the final major turn. This is the turn the MH370 is believed to have done north of Indonesia after leaving Butterworth radar coverage. We know that at 18:39 and 58 seconds, when Malaysian operations tried to reach the cockpit via a SATCOM call, the plane no longer had the same route as when it was last observed on radar. Indeed, the BFO reading is very different and gives a route to the south. I refer you to my videos on the BTO and BFO in French to better understand these terms, and that will be discussed in this video. It is essential to understand them well to know what they allow us to deduce. The plane therefore turned between 18:22 and 18:39, but where and when and what was the trajectory followed, it is not as easy as it seems. Several hypotheses have been formulated by the independent group or CAPSULE with many variations. Patrick and Jean-Luc offer here another possibility. Remember that it is considered here that the person at the control had shut down all the electrical systems and depressurized the plane to cause everyone on board to fall into hypoxia. The person at the controls had more oxygen in the cockpit than the passengers. He would therefore have waited long enough to be sure that no one would come to interrupt his plan. After 1 hour, he could be sure that it was enough. The temperature in the cockpit having dropped considerably, he needed to restore the power supply to the aircraft in order to have also the autopilot, and the pilot restarted the 4 generators as we see here. But by doing this, he knew that it would relaunch a system which he absolutely did not want to betray his position, the ACARS. He therefore had to deactivate this system before the connection was restored and before it sent the messages stored in memory since the shutdown and the new position of the airplane. According to Patrick, the pilot first tried to put the plane on autopilot toward Nilam. Following a descent, he accelerated slightly at first, then more strongly after the automatic system was put back on. Once done, he could turn away from piloting and go into the on-screen menus to do several actions. The airplane, having at that time remained on course since the restoration of the electrical power supply, found itself slightly south of Nilam. The activation of the autopilot caused the airplane to turn to the right, inbound Nilam. The pilot, busy doing his urgent actions to prevent the ACARS from transmitting, the plane had switched to course-keeping mode, it's a track mode, continued straight after Nilam since he had not entered any other waypoints afterwards. It was only after realizing his mistake that he would have disconnected the autopilot to turn left, not wanting to deviate from the airway so as not to arouse suspicion on the military radars, and take the direction to Povus. We will see why later. Patrick and Jean-Luc estimate that it took approximately 2 minutes before the SATCOM restarted and sent the connection request. The priority for the pilot was then to remove an essential parameter, the flight ID, the flight identification. This is the flight call sign that is entered into the flight management system and used in ICARS messages. To delete this flight ID, you must do a data link reset. This is the only possible explanation as you will understand. The procedure is described in the document here and taken from the Boeing 777 manual. Why is this detail is so important? Because this flight ID remains stored in the aircraft memory, even with a discharged battery, and is only deleted, as the author shows here, when the engines have been off for 9 minutes and one of the doors of the plane was opened. Therefore, if no one had done a data link reset, we would have had this flight ID in the Inmarsat log connection messages. However, it is not the case. So someone touched it. This is what we see in the table here with an extract of the data. Jean-Luc interpreted the raw hexadecimal data and noted that the 1825 reconnection was similar to the aircraft's first ground connection in Kuala Lumpur before the flight, and this reconnection did not have the flight ID because it had been erased following the return of the previous flight. This is an extremely important detail because until now, no one had been able to provide a rational or a valid explanation for the absence of this flight ID after the reconnection of the SATCOM. Let's go back to the trajectory. Patrick and Jean-Luc have superimposed their trajectory and the BTO arcs of this SATCOM reconnection of the first arc. The first arc is broken down into seven arcs. Indeed, when we designate the first arc, it is actually several arcs and therefore an average arc corresponding to these multiple exchanges. Patrick and Jean-Luc checked that the position of the plane was at all times consistent with the Inmarsat tolerance of the BTO, which is 50 microseconds, and that's the case. But not only. They also checked the correspondence with the second parameter of Inmarsat, the BFO. The tolerance adopted by Inmarsat engineers is plus or minus 7 Hz. The BFO is affected by the speed of the aircraft toward the satellite and by its vertical speed. In their trajectory, they assumed the plane had descended either through a lack of pilot oversight or because the pilot had seen the Indigo flight in front of him. At night, as it is very difficult to estimate distances and approach, and it could have been a desire to descend under the airway, this possibility had already been issued by Capsule in the past. The pilot will then climb back to flight level 300, which was the chosen level, and the BFO recorded at 1827 is perfectly valid for a rate of climb between 0 and 3000 feet per minute. So the trajectory assumed here is perfectly consistent and in agreement with the Inmarsat data. The table here lists all the technical details. The values in red show the deviations from the value received by Inmarsat for the trajectory assumed in this study. We are within the tolerances of plus or minus 7 Hz for the BFO and plus or minus 50 microseconds for the BTO. Clearly, such a trajectory is scientifically admissible with Inmarsat, and this is essential if we want the investigators to take an interest on it. The route to Povus was ideal, not to get closer to the Indian ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, while staying away from Indonesia by following an airway, again not to attract attention. After Povus, the course 188 degrees, which corresponds to the BFO noted during the telephone call in the cockpit just after Povus, is consistent with a desire to pass sufficiently west of a storm cell west of Indonesia, while wanting to stay far enough away from this country not to be detected by seaborne gas radar. The pilot would then have taken the maximum holding speed of 265 knots, which is Mach 0.706 according to the weather data of the day, and this up to the 6 arcs. Why such a speed? Because, as Patrick discovered, this speed will make it possible to stick with the observed flight time of the MH370. The disturbing coincidence. Patrick and Jean-Luc provide a detailed table of the parameters of this branch with the fuel calculation for each segment. Patrick clearly showed that these values given by Boeing in the Annex 1.6e, published on the Malaysian final report, have not been corrected for the ISA deviation that was present at that time and place. As a conclusion, this part is very interesting because it provides a different hypothesis from those already put forward by other studies, official studies, independent group studies, and capture studies. The authors provide indisputable technical data to show that it corresponds to the official data. All this shows, once again if necessary, especially with the detail of the flight ID, that it was necessary for the author of this act to have more than solid knowledge of the aircraft and how to navigate in it, in these menus, to perform this action in a sufficient constrained time to do so. In the next video we will discuss the trajectory in the Indian Ocean. I'll let you with the video of the authors to depict what happened in this part of the flight.